Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing. Okay, it is 2:45 in the morning on US Eastern Time. It's 3:45 in the afternoon on a very sunny afternoon in Perth, Australia. I'm not sure how many people will get for this webinar, but let's quickly do the disclaimer. All Bookmap Limited materials, information and presentation are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Trading futures, equities and digital currencies involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Okay, welcome everybody. Hey Marcus, hey Marius, how are you going? I'm hoping that mic test that it's all okay and that you can hear me. Just checking here. Yeah, we've got a few on YouTube and you on Discord, Marius. And I am just checking that the screens are all presenting okay. They look like they're okay on YouTube, and it looks like it's okay on Discord. We've got 14 minutes until the open, so let's very quickly do the slides. Okay, come on slides. Okay, I haven't actually got the calendar in US Eastern Time, so I've just got my calendar from Financial Juice here. It'll be 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the London Open, so all I want to redo is point out that we've got a little bit of news at 4:30. That's the construction PMI of a few of those countries, Italy, France, and the Eurozone, Germany, etc. And you've got an ECB speaker at 4:35. So I'm not expecting a huge amount of news-based volatility. Later on in the US session, at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, you've got the trade balance, and that may be a little bit more volatile. Anyway, let's keep going. Where we back to the dailies on ES. We talked a few days ago about the break of the reverse trend line, and we've had a great bounce up. It's not that far off the downtrend line now. So what we haven't had, even though we've had some significant up moves, is we have not had a blow off top yet. So we'll bear that in mind, but maybe not for this session, but maybe for an RTH session coming up. On NQ, you can see it's much stronger. We're right back on this daily trend line, and we'll have to see if it is going to be respected or not. Quick look at the session, not as bullish as the last few days. We're actually below yesterday's mid on the 10-minute on the ES, and we're right at yesterday's mid. In fact, we're actually a little bit lower than that. I took this about 45 minutes ago, an hour ago. And a quick snapshot of where the other markets that I track for correlations actually opened about at the German Open, which is now 50 minutes ago. So you can see in particular with the DAX and the Euro stocks, which are the two charts on the right, that they opened well below their yesterday low, which is the red horizontal line. So they are still, if I look over to my other screen, they're still below that yesterday's low. So that is of note. So in other words, we're saying for a change, we are not in a very bullish position, but that does not mean that we won't get a reversal at some stage. And a typical time might be 4:30 a.m. Eastern, which would be in an hour and a half if that happens. But we haven't seen any dramatic blow off to the downside yet either. So it is looking quite bearish as we go into the open. And as we look across at Bookmap, I've got a change here, and I'll just explain what I've been doing. So in NQ especially, what we've seen with the December futures is horrible algo bands. So if I go into the normal Bookmap chart, the unfiltered chart, you can see all these algo bands following price, within a channel, X points higher and X points lower. That is painful to watch. So I actually started reading about the Trader Map Pro additional filters that have been added since I last tested it. And this is a Trader Map Pro filter, and we can just look quickly to see which one it is. So the filter is show only the orders that have not changed. So I was looking at this in RTH yesterday, and it did have value. I took a couple of trades, or they were helped by the information that I got off it. And you know, it's more important, I think, for NQ than it is for ES. Where I've got it for both ES and NQ, and I've got a shortcut on my keyboard so I can quickly toggle backwards and forwards during this webinar. That's the, if we just zoom out, that's the filtered one of unchanged orders in ES. So if we're looking across them both, and we'll just center ES, that's the orders that have not changed. The problem that I've got with the ES one in ETH is that it is incompatible with the MBO stops and icebergs. So if you look at the MBO stops and icebergs, you can see there was an iceberg which has now been run through, but you can see all of these little stops and icebergs on the sub panel, and hopefully we'll get some more information during the actual session on those, and that's why I'd rather keep it on ES on the normal bookmap rather than the filtered. But it's a pretty easy toggle, so I may do that occasionally during the session. The other thing I've done, and I'll drag over the TPOs to explain why I've done it. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, so I'll just take it off again. Right. I've previously been drawing just the estimated value that we might travel or traverse during ETH, essentially the last value from the RTH. From the RTH session. But what I thought is, because I've already coded, let's show you the studies in this one, because I've already coded this rectangle to bookmap, and that is me, and I have coded that, I thought I may as well actually use it and show you, some of the volume profile areas that are easy to track in there. So I've actually got 8 of those, 8 instances of that study from Sierra appearing inside bookmap. So I've got 2 on each TPO chart for NQ and ES, and also 2 on my execution chart. And the reason why is because if I just drag this one across, the symbol name on these Trader Map Pros is slightly different because it's a copy of the actual rhythmic ES chart. So I had to have 2 of my studies to get these values into these columns. So one is from my volume profile on my TPO chart, and one is from my actual execution chart, so when I'm actually stalking a trade. It was just an opportunity to actually use that, because I think I've had many webinars where this column here, or I've actually added one now, but this column here was basically blank, so meaningless like it is at the moment because I've got nothing drawn. So let's just demonstrate this. So if I quickly just on ES, where are we now? We're there. If I just draw something just under the price, you can see what I'm doing. And the reason why I'm explaining this is to encourage people to code. The API into Bookmap is completely open. I think there is a lot of value in. See, that appeared just there and then. That was what I drew there, and that appears within 30 seconds, 45 seconds sometimes inside Bookmap. The Bookmap one refreshes every 60 seconds. My study in Sierra refreshes every 15 seconds. It's just something that you find, one of the real benefits I find with actually coding and some of the algos that I've coded is that it makes my stalking of trades, whether I'm going short or long, more strategic. You're less likely to be impulsive because you will have manually or some form of back testing all the types of stalking that you've done, so that even though we should always be following what the market is telling us, sometimes we're just a little bit more strategic if we have been back testing ourselves with what we've been coding, and I do find coding gives us that advantage or value. Right. I also hope that nobody can actually hear a fan. We're coming into summer in Perth, and I have a feeling it's going to be a very hot summer, so I have got a fan going, but I've got noise reduction on the microphone, so hopefully nobody can hear anything. I'm just doing a time check, 2:54. Anyway, what was I doing? I was just showing on the TPO. Let's go back to this. and I'll just remove that in a second. So essentially this is the shaded area is ES in ETH, and we're forming value. It's not completely symmetrical, but we're forming value inside a wider value area over the last couple of days. So we're basically, I mean, after where's my pen? Let's have a look. So after we've basically gone up like that, we're just going like that at the moment. That tends to be bullish in the long run. We're not talking about the next hour of this session, but in the long run, there's often a continuation up like that. And that may well work out in an RTH session. It could work out in an ETH session, may work out on major news later in the week. But you know, this is an opportunity for the market maybe to have a little pullback as well. But we shall see. Let's get rid of that and get back on the cursor. So the areas that are essentially drawn, I've drawn yesterday's POC, which will appear there, and yesterday's value low in my definition, which is essentially just this little LVN there on yesterday's RTH session, a value area high or value high, and yesterday's high and low. So that's essentially what I'm just marking out that you'll see in the second column in that one. So really not an awful lot to talk about on where the TPO is on ES. Let's have a look at the NQ one again. We've got a nice sort of balanced value zone. We're below that. You can see price at the moment. We're into this little value load or low volume node that I've drawn here. It'd be interesting to see if we can get below that, in fact below this value from Monday, and then work our way down to something. But we shall see. Every London Open recently has been quite bullish, so this is an unusual one that we are far from bullish going into the Open. And time check, 3 minutes to go. Again, I'm just going to check to see where we've got a few people watching on YouTube, and I'm just seeing how many people. It's just you and me, Marius, on Discord. I'm always happy to do more of these London sessions because I don't think many people actually do live Bookmap commentary right into the London Open, but it's really finding out whether there is any audience for this or not. Just getting rid of that chart. So let's just focus on what we're seeing inside Bookmap going into the Open. So let's have a look at zooming in. And a reminder, when we're looking at this resting liquidity across ES and NQ, it's much more important in terms of determining importance for resting liquidity zones to appear in ES than NQ. You know, so if they're conflicting, and they were, if you go back to sort of like halfway towards the end, halfway to 3/4 of the way through the Asian session, in this ETH session, they were conflicting. There was some nice resting liquidity up there in NQ, but it was all below in ES, and surprise, surprise, we've gone down. So that's one of the reasons why, if you're going to start looking at resting liquidity in NQ, it's always quite wise to double check what is present in ES in case we're just being gamed. But at the moment, in terms of liquidity that has been there for a while, I'm just looking across. It's only 22 at 15,165, but that's NQ. And ES, let's just zoom all the way out. And this little zone here at 4361 has 181 R. And I apologize again, I think I have not changed the font size. So let me just boost the font size as we go into the Open so that it's a little bit more clear. Apologies again. And we've got a 1 minute time check, so we'll stay on the MBO, and I'll remember to use my shortcut when I occasionally toggle across to the filtered TraderMap Pro version, but we'll keep it on TraderMap Pro on NQ. Because it's been going down relatively slowly, and because we've got this liquidity below, we're still expecting a little bit of a grind or some kind of climactic pop to the downside before we get any form of reversal up, if we do get a reversal up. It hasn't been one of those really big spikes down yet, or we haven't really seen a big delta tail. You know, if we're zooming out, and these delta tails should be pretty much identical between the filtered and the unfiltered. So if I go across Yeah, they're pretty much identical. So in other words, you can trust that the information is objective and has not been filtered out. In other words, the filter is only applying to the orders, not the volume traded. Okay, now we have open. We're at the London Open. I'm looking across at at the end of the DAX. So the DAX and the Euro Stoxx still well below their lows. I'll get rid of those, and we won't forget to have a look at FTSE. FTSE's not quite at its lows yet. Yesterday's low in FTSE is over here. So because this is the driving open market right this second, we shouldn't get too surprised if they do have a drive down to that low at some point. And oil has come down a lot in the last few days, so we're finally ticked below $80 again. Get rid of that. I'm just showing you those TradingView charts because I do look at the correlations all the time, and I'm also looking at the currencies. So I'm looking at the moment I've got the bond open and the euro dollar. If you want to see what they are doing, I can just show you those as well. So we're having a tick up in the euro dollar, which is bullish so far for this tiny little pullback in NQ. By the way, feel free to ask any questions on YouTube or Discord. Hey Stan, welcome. So far, nothing overly dramatic or volatile at this open. And if we do get any volatility or unexpected volatility, again, I point to that 3:30 a.m. news release as maybe a source of volatility for the DAX, which would have consequential impact maybe in ES and NQ. So I'm looking at um, this level here to see, I mean, in the unfiltered, you can see that they are moving those orders. Well, they keep taking them away because the color changes from red to orange to yellow. So if we go across to the filtered, there's the 36750, and we can see how many are actually there, 130. So the actual change is 12 orders, and that's pretty much minimal. So that gives us a good indication that there is resting liquidity down there, and 112 at this time of the day you know, is relatively meaningful. But as we know from so many of these moves, they need fuel to keep going down. So they'll often have a squeeze up if they actually intend to go down. The other thing about this particular 30 minutes is that if they do get into some momentum round about now, the 5 past to the 10 past, that will likely continue for 20 minutes, but we're talking about real momentum. And so far, this is just chop. There's no real momentum. So I'm just shooting the breeze and just watching the liquidity. Yeah, so on my very short term, well, you can see that on NQ, I'm looking at a chart in Sierra as well. Since we hit this little low on the microstructure, all these little swings have been higher or slightly higher, and that is bullish. So that at the moment we are exploring up on a microstructure perspective. So we're exploring up towards this level, the 15195. So we're watching all the little micro swing lows. Going to see if they're going to eat into that 15195. At the same time, we'll watch over on ES. And yeah, one of the other things which I always mention that I haven't mentioned yet is where is settlement. So settlement is above us, quite well above us on both ES and NQ. So there is always the possibility that they have a big drive up towards settlement. And, just zooming out, they have some fuel. It is a reddish tail, but I don't know whether they have enough fuel to get up to settlement in this 30-minute spell. Hey, Roman. I may not talk as much as I sometimes do in the 8 a.m. session, just because there is not an awful lot to talk about. I'm really just doing some live commentary for this. I have temporarily switched off my trading engine. This is really the time I do like to trade, but it is hard to talk and trade at the same time. So we're still, at the moment, what am I doing? I'm watching this microstructure. So I'm watching all these little swing lows. That's quite a thick line. And then I'm watching this liquidity, which they're advertising that they're trying to drag us into, and then seeing, is that something that they can then spike us back down to this liquidity at 15,178.50. So if we do get bearish, I'm expecting this little low here at 15,187 to be taken out properly. And we have got some form of delta tail there. I'm also looking at the size of the orders going through, even though I haven't got my time and sales in front of me. I've got a visual time and sales inside Sierra, so I'm looking at that. And I'm looking at the orders across. I've seen orders of 54 and 68 in ES to buy, and I've seen 13 to buy in NQ, but not hugely bullish. If I was seeing a sequence of bullish orders in NQ, that's when I begin to pay attention. So if I see 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, or 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, that piques my interest. But I have not seen that yet. But they're keeping this area here as the flag of interest, 15,195. And if we go over here to the filtered, that 140, yep. And looking down on the filtered, just looking at the actual order numbers, 176, 133. Finally, we're getting into that 195, or we're very, very close. Looking across at DAX and Eurostox, you can see that their Eurostox has broken back above yesterday's low, and DAX is trying to now. So they're a little bit bullish. So in terms of action, it was actually not in our Bookmap charts. It was in the DAX itself there. And it's something that I always try and be cognizant of. So even though I was looking across at this 195 and thinking because of the microstructure, we were likely to go and take it out, you would not scalp long there, or I would not scalp long there without clearly seeing what DAX was up to. DAX and Eurostox. If I drag those down as well, let me just show you. So the dark green horizontal line in DAX and Eurostox are their settlement from their close from yesterday. Um, as I've said before, these stocks love to go and tag home, and that is home. So again, even though we might have opened down here, never be overly surprised if there is a drive just to go and tag that. And also remember, we are in a bullish run from last week. So we look at the microstructure on ES. You can see that all the micro swing lows are higher as well. Aha, question, something to say or something to talk about. Do I prefer London over the New York session? It's a good question. Thanks, Stephen, for the question. The answer is they've got different edges. Um, so I think in the way that I personally use Bookmap, I have more edge from Bookmap itself in this session, the London Open 2 hours, I'd say. I'd actually call it 2.5 hours, maybe sort of from some time after the German Open for a couple of hours after that. Um, but there are completely different edges in the the actual RTH session, because the stock market is the US stock market is open, that I am very, very interested in. So yeah, I do look at options. I look at internals a lot. I look at the stocks, any unusual activity or stocks that might be driving us today. I don't really have that in this session. I have delved into the German stocks. I mean, it's currently the DAX is 40 stocks. I've done various studies on those 40 stocks, but I don't find the same kind of edges that you can get from options or stock related information as you do on the US stocks and options in that session. So yeah, it's horses for courses. I also find that you've got to be very careful with the opens. I mean, we haven't, and the open at the US session is more dangerous than this one. Um, because although I do talk about, if there's a huge spike, a lot of that is often taken back or reclaimed. Those spikes, like yesterday's RTH session, can go a lot further than you can possibly imagine. So they're even more dangerous than the London Open spikes. So I'm very wary of that, and I find that some of the best opportunities to trade in the US session are later on. So sort of at the half hours, whether it's the 10, 10:30, 11, 11:30, and because we've just gone through daylight saving, and I live in a zone where there is no daylight saving, um, it's getting later and later in the evening. So right now, for me, in Perth, the US Open is at 10:30 p.m. So if I want to, get some kind of reversal at 11 a.m. New York time, that is midnight my time. So I have 4 months a year, or just over 4 months a year, where it's a little bit harder trying to exploit those edges in that RTH session. So maybe I'll pay a bit more attention to some of the half hour type reversals that you have in this session between now, say 1:50 a.m. Eastern and 9 a.m. Eastern. So during the US winter time, or my the middle of summer, I'll pay more attention to this session. But I mean, one of the other things is that I don't really know what the appetite is for webinars at this time of the day. So even though, there should be a lot of traders in Europe and London that are interested in looking at Bookmap at this time, there haven't been an awful lot of requests that I've seen from people actually wanting it. So I'm not here this weekend, so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing it today. And I thought it was also an opportunity because I've mentioned recently that we must do a London session. So this was an opportunity to do it since I can't do the Friday breakfast session. So let me just go down to that. And we just look again at these little swing lows. If that one's one, I'm just looking across at NQ. You can see that we've essentially kept this exploration on the micro basis going. We're almost back at yesterday's point of control from the RTH session. And in ES, just have a look where ES is. ES is really back into its value from ETH and quite close to Monday's settlement, T plus 2. So that drive to the DAX and Eurostock settlement, again, that's something that we can't ignore. Eurostox is getting very, very close. Remember, these aren't the exact values. This is a CFD based on it, but it's as good as for the purpose that I'm using it, which is to see where it is in relation to yesterday's high, low, and close. So when Eurostox gets that close, yeah, it is likely, I'm trying to get the right word, it is very likely that it will get there. It's just a few points shy now, only a few points shy of its settlement from yesterday. And we're really back in this congestion zone now. Yeah, NQ's right at yesterday's point of control. That little red marker I've got there in that column, that was from my execution chart. I was looking for a much earlier nasty spike squeeze up to there, but I'm no longer looking there. Yeah, so I was looking for a real squeeze up to there and then to take out where we've got to now. So I really wanted us to get and take that out, but it took that out before it had this squeeze up or before it had this grind up. So my red stalking zone is relevant, but I would not be surprised if we don't have a little pullback down, but at the moment all of these swing lows on the microstructure have continued to go up, so we're continuing to explore up. And Eurostox hasn't quite tagged its settlement, so the bullish action continues, and we are not yet at the 330. So, if there are these algos from some of these German banks that do kick in roughly around that time, they certainly would not have kicked in yet if it is that time that they are turned on. And one thing I did say a few minutes ago was that if we did get into some form of momentum, and the momentum started there after about 305 to 310, that is likely to continue for a good 20 minutes into the half hour. So when they start, if they start the momentum not right on 3 o'clock, but a few minutes later, and then they do have a momentum, I don't tend to fade in those next 20 minutes. Center that. Now let's just have a toggle onto the filtered. So if we zoom out vertically, this resting liquidity has acted as a wall of support and is taking us towards yesterday's point of control up at 4380-ish. And now Eurostox has tagged yesterday's settlement. I'm interested in when one of those three, whether it's FTSE or DAX or Eurostox, tags the settlement. Because then, you could say that one of the aims, it doesn't have to be all of them tagging it, but one of the aims has been achieved. And at that point, the hypothesis, if that's the right word, that they would get there has been completed, and the fact that the others might not get there is kind of irrelevant to me. In terms of my statistical analysis of whether that was likely to be achieved, I really look at it as one of them, not all of them. Although that being said, quite often the case when one of them does get there, the other two do as well. DAX is certainly getting quite bullish now. I'm sure some of you have got it on your charts. And FTSE is about to tag its settlement from yesterday. FTSE is within 3 points. So we're right in value yesterday. Yesterday's most traded price on NQ has been tagged, and ES is not that far away. It's a few points, but not that far away. 5 points away. And you've got some nice liquidity up here at 4379. And we still haven't had any microstructure lows showing weakness in NQ yet. Yeah, Marius, you sound like you're in the same kind of scenarios as I am. Seoul, which is even 1 hour further ahead than me. Perth is on the same time as Singapore and Beijing. My colleague and friend Tom is a heavy believer in statistics. So, if you were going to make some kind of statistical based trade, sort of, one of the ways of trading this is that once we had that momentum from 305 onwards, is that you'd look to scalp in long with a tight stop, right? And you could have used any of the microstructure swing lows just behind it as a stop, and make it a statistical based trade rather than any other form of trade. If we're looking now at the delta tail, it's looking, lovely and green. So, yeah, one thing I think I've mentioned before, but I'll mention specifically today, is that the sessions themselves, the Asian session to the London session, they're two completely different sessions. So it does not matter a hoot if one of them was bearish or choppy. It's not going to affect how bullish or bearish the next session is going to be. Or ordinarily, that is not the case unless there's been some major news. And that major news can include earnings releases. Having a look at the microstructure in ES as well. Yep, even on ES, the microstructure remained bullish. So if you zoom into every single little low, just a little wick down, that is very bullish. That's a strong, strong grind up. I've got a 10-second chart open up in Sierra, and that is a beautiful channel up from about 307 onwards. Yeah, one of the other things that I do watch is book pressure. I haven't coded one yet in Sierra, in Bookmap, but I have coded one in Sierra, and yeah, it's often a lovely way of seeing them change around the sentiment when you see the pressure is all up, and every market with book order pressure has a different flavor. So NQ being a much thinner market than ES, it's got a completely different flavor of pressure. Okay, now on the filtered NQ, so got a little bit of downside pressure here, so we've got a little bit of resistance at the 15,210 mark. See a little wall, slightly thicker band there, and they've added some walls just above. So then what do we do? We'll have a look at the last swing low and see if we can take it out properly. So I'm not talking about one tick or two ticks, I'm talking about a clean break of it. Because the time is now 3:24, 3:25. So in other words, if I'm going to start fading this up move, the time on the clock lets me do it. You can have soft rules, you can have hard rules. So if I have a soft rule saying do not fade this momentum for the next 20 minutes, well then once that soft rule or the clock that is in that soft rule has now ended, or 25 past has ended, then I can start looking at shorts again. So that one is taken out, so that the picture is now either chop or we're going to explore down. At the top of this tail, it's not wholly green, but that could just be a big order that came in. The tops are not always identical, the bottoms are not always identical. When a seller comes in, whether it's right at the top or slightly early, slightly late, will vary. Look at the zoomed out picture. So these resting liquidities, this one in particular, 43-ish, 44-ish, has been there all day. But again, yes, resting liquidity much more important than NQ. And I mustn't forget to toggle back to the other unfiltered chart to have a look at any of the MBOs. So that was a little stop run here, you can see that. So if we draw on this again, so if they had a nice little range here, the MBO tells us that they stopped out some sellers there and got us this move up towards the liquidity at 15,210. That's what the MBO may help us with there. Still exploring up, it seems. So FTSE has tagged settlement. Eurostoxx tagged settlement. Oil not really turned around, still very weak. The euro versus the dollar did participate in this nice up move, and the DAX has not tagged settlement, but is in a small pullback. So two of the three markets did tag them. 327.5. Got a couple of minutes until the half hour. Back on the filtered map. So that looks like a reverse spring there. So if we have a look across, yeah, it's a one tick. It's almost like a head and shoulders pattern, those three tops there, into resting liquidity. So, if you are one of those people that likes head and shoulders, that is head and shoulders on a micro basis. That's exactly what it looks like in Bookmap. You can screenshot that. You either get in there or you get in there, and you try and have your stops up above it in that kind of zone. So you can still get a retight stop, and you should already have got 2R on that if you traded it with a tight stop. But if you want to know what head and shoulders looks like in Bookmap, that's what it looks like. $3.29, so we've got another minute. I'm just intrigued to see whether there is an uptick in volume in the next 60 seconds or so, or a change in the price pattern behavior in terms of the volatility. Just zooming out on ES. So in terms of, do we think this resting liquidity can be useful? I think it can. So we essentially came all the way down to a resting liquidity zone and came back up to 1, whilst the Eurostoxx and DAX were having a tag of home. The DAX, I think, has stopped trying. there's now, maybe the algos have been turned on, there's now quite a lot of downside movement in all three of the European indices. So that head and shoulders in NQ right back down to this liquidity there would have been a lovely, lovely trade, maybe even a 2.5 hour. And that in my headphone, I don't know if any of you heard that, that's the 3:30 chime that I just got. So if I had got in at my original stalk zone or had still been waiting to trade live, yeah, I'd have had to have had a reasonable stop to get in there. But I'm not sure what my ultimate target would have been since the target was already tagged. Yeah, what I like, why I like discussing those trades, which essentially are just trading microstructure with liquidity, is that maybe you got your 2.5 hour. And the fact, if it goes all the way back up and then takes out this liquidity is neither here nor there as long as you scaled out and you um, took your profits, because we are not in a home run game, or I'm not in a home run game. I'm looking for high expectancy trades with defined risk. And so you could have called this one a triple top that's about to be taken out now. There it goes. So right at the 3:30, this is what we've talked about with screenshots in the channel on Discord over the last couple of weeks. We often get a good swing point. It's often a good swing low. So it'll be interesting to see if today is another scenario where they do that or they take this out. So if we use the bookmap drawing tools and we draw the horizontal line at this swing low there and see whether that's going to be taken out. And again for ES we do the same. You can almost see settlement now on the horizon in NQ. So it is only 20 odd points away. That is interesting because the rebound that DAX had off its yesterday low, it's now halfway between yesterday's low and settlement. And it was such a good rebound, you wonder whether it will get there. If it gets there, then the likelihood that NQ can get to its settlement is obviously increased. That little yellow marker there, I might get rid of that one. Serves no purpose to me now. Should disappear within 30 seconds. And ES's tag of home. Home in ES is at 4384.25. That's yesterday's settlement, so we're 7 points away. Q, 20 points away. Taking a little while for this yellow marker to disappear. It's on my suggestion list bookmap that the refresh time on this column is faster than 60 seconds. Maybe in the 20 or 30 second mark would be great. Yeah, it's just disappeared. So the next big target for ES is yesterday's point of control. We know that NQ's tagged its, and because lots and lots of volume is traded there, it's always a likely scenario that it can get up there, provided the other markets, the other indices stay bullish. I didn't actually check the news release. I didn't even read it out. Let's have a look. 16:30 my time. Italian construction PMI 51.8, Eurozone construction 42.7, French construction 41, German construction 38.3. That should be the only news that we have for the remainder of this hour session. I'll try and run over by a couple of minutes, but don't think there's an awful lot of people on. So, Marius, you've got a question. So it doesn't surprise us on NQ that you've got this little resistance wall and that there's a pullback. That does not surprise us. You've also got some delta, nice green delta tail there for them to squeeze a little bit of. When they have those pullbacks, in hoping to determine whether it's just a pullback or it's actually a reversal, having ES side by side does often help me. You know, if ES can only go down a tick when you have these little spikes down in NQ, you think, well, maybe it's just a liquidity spike down. You want to see a little bit more from NQ to make you really believe that the market wants to go down. And the moment we also want to see some more resting liquidity below, and a lot of it's gone. I mean, once you start talking about these areas, it's too far away for the next 10, 20, 30 minutes. Oh, ECB speaker, he's speaking, is he? Okay. Let's see, let me turn on financial juice to see whether it comes through or not today. And so financial juice is on now. I doubt whether Gwendus has said anything too negative then. So FTSE is stalling at its settlement. It's stalling quite badly at its settlement. Eurostoxx really hasn't progressed past its settlement. Those are the two most bearish things that I can see at the moment, and the fact that we've got a nice liquidity wall above in NQ and in ES. In terms of relative volumes, let's have a look at this one as well. I'll just drag that down for a second. So on the relative volume chart, we did see a pickup. It's been gradually increasing, but it's 82%. And the actual range is really low. For ETH, NQ has only made 39 out of a potential average of 115. ES 11 out of 27. That's in points. So in other words, I've picked a really dull session to talk about. So going back to the question that I had from Stephen Cock, yeah, if I just had sessions like this, yeah, I would become almost certainly just somebody that traded with very tight stops in NQ. Very hard to do real swings in this when it's so dull. Yes, we've got that little marker at 330 that it's pulling back towards, which is also sort of a double swing low if you count this little one as a swing as well. Just drag across DAX and Eurostoxx, you can see that it's either gone completely dead or the bullishness has gone out of it. Remember, we don't have to take a trade. There is absolutely no compulsion whatsoever. If the market is dull and it is not a high expectancy with good volatility, you don't take it, in my view. We'll have a quick look at the MBOs in ES while we're here as well. See how they could have helped. So you had a 33 and some buy ice there, 73.45. That was nice. If you add those two together, that was relatively nice. And if NQ is back in its ETH value, or already back in its RTH value as well, there's always the chance that it's going to traverse the entire value, in which case it would likely tag settlement eventually. But we're not getting a driving force from anything in Europe. The only thing that's really had a trend session so far, and I'll drag it across, is the bond. There is not a direct correlation between the bond going up and a lovely trend in ES and NQ in this session. So that's something to be wary of. It's interesting information. It's market generated information that it is going up, but you know, the information you get from the euro versus the USD is probably more useful. And we haven't got the pre-market yet, so the Qs, the TQs, the SPYs are not open, or the Apples, Nasdaqs, Microsoft, they're not open for another 20 odd minutes. You know, one of the reasons why you might want the time and sales around then is just to see if there's anything unusual that happens then at that open or the pre-opening. So far this resting liquidity is attracting. It's doing its magnetism so far. So even though there's next to nothing or slightly bearish action happening on FTSE and DAX, this liquidity is still sort of attracting. Or maybe it's because there's nothing really below to attract it. And in ES but this really is quite dull. I remember doing a webinar with Bruce for an NQ and ES open, and that day there was really interesting action. It was mean reversion, but there was high volatility, high ranges. That was a little bit more interesting to do a webinar on than this. In terms of this nice spike action there, one thing that we would not be surprised about is if we get into this spike here. So if we draw this spike, it's one of those things where it may take a long time to play out, but it can get it back into that and retrace quite a lot of it. So far, not the case. Instead, this little magnetism of this racing liquidity above looks like it's more important information. And the fact that we're in value, so we can traverse to the other side of value. That's why I've got these markers on this column here in ES. That is the reason to remind me that, I'm above what I marked as yesterday's value low. It's not the technical definition of value area low, it's my definition. And so we're within that, so there is always the chance that we will traverse from there through there to there. So in other words, from what I perceived as the value low, and I can bring it over again, what I perceived as the value low in yesterday's session to the POC to the value high. So once you back it above here, there's always a potential. It's a reasonably good probability. It's not that high, but it's reasonably good. So that liquidity they removed, and they want to get filled around here now, which makes you wonder. Does that mean that we could reclaim some of this? If they move this liquidity down, do they want to absorb some buyers here and push it down? Beginning to run out of time, I think. I'll get Bookmap to mark this video on YouTube as London Open, just in case anybody historically wants to find it in the future. In fact, I'll get them, whenever it's just a London Open, we'll get them to mark it to differentiate it from the ones where we do them at the breakfast session. Just looking at the ETH range as well, we're not that far from the high, the overnight high. So NQ is within 10 points, and ES is within 4 points of its overnight high. That's probably because the ranges are so small. So again, it's a probability that we're going to get very, very close, if not take it out now. Okay, well, it's been a little bit dull, but I hope it's provided some information or edutainment for people. So I will think I'll wrap it up at this stage. So thank you very, very much for watching, and good luck if you're trading later in this session, at the breakfast session maybe, or RTH. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, for that breakfast session. Thank you again.